what's your sense from employers about how much they care about meeting people's needs for fulfillment with their needs to get the job done?
I mean, the employers that we work with, I think, which is quite a specific group, I guess, but it is a growing group of employers, recognise the need for people to feel motivated. I mean, it's all linked to productivity and all of that kind of stuff. How do you get the best out of people? How you get the best out of people is to give them something that they're to feel motivated, and they also recognise the whole kind of work-life balance issues. It's a huge thing at the moment because of the labour shortages, labour market shortages and stuff. Obviously, employers are very concerned and have a lot of problems filling vacancies across sectors. So they are looking to attract a sort of wider pool of people. So that means that they are looking at, they are coming to us for the working mum stuff, diversity and inclusion, all that kind of stuff. And age is part of that. And we're trying to bring some of those employers that have been doing a lot of stuff from the working mum side of things and working dads, and bring them over onto the age side of things, because as I said before, it is sometimes seen, they think they're doing stuff, but they're not actually doing stuff, and they're only kind of vaguely aware of all these things that people have just brought up now about like ageism, just not having anybody for example, from the recruitment process, the way that the jobs, the words, the images and words that are used in job adverts, the who's on the interview panel, who are all the other people in the office, that whole kind of social exclusion type of thing that was brought up. But I mean, although I think that I can't remember what his name was actually, but he said that he felt he didn't want to go to any of the kind of social events, but you still feel, even if you don't want to go, you still feel excluded, I guess, because you don't feel part of the team, and you feel that everybody else would prefer to have somebody who's more like them. And so there is awareness among employers that diversity and having people with different experiences, which includes different ages, is important, and having a good mix of multi-generational sort of workforce is a good thing. But it's getting them to move from being aware of it to actually doing something, because the research shows that the employee's perception of ageism is quite high, but the employers don't get that. There's a gap between what the employers think they're doing great stuff, but they obviously aren't. And there's a kind of they've just kind of left it and think they're doing stuff, but they're not actually actively doing something. But then some of them are beginning to do that. They are becoming very kind of conscious of being age friendly, of where they advertise their jobs, of the wording that they use in the jobs, the imagery, and they're going out to get older workers. And as I said, the labour market shortages are also prompting them to look more widely at.
Should we give them a chance to shine? Because I think if they're doing good things, then let's hear about them. So who are the employers that are impressing you in that regard?
So we have a top employer charter on our website, and people who advertise there, or they sign up to the charter and pledge to do various different things, including take age diversity seriously, obviously, and do be proactive on that score. So we're working with lots of different sort of employers, and we know, for example, like EGAS, the insurance firm Aegis, they have been recruiting for a variety of roles, and they're really keen to attract over 50s, and the roles have done quite well. So they're mostly customer service and sales roles, offering often hybrid working. They are also offering apprenticeships for older workers and returner roles, which are doing quite well. And then Azets, which is an accountancy firm, they've had a really big push on over 50s. McDonald's has got a big campaign, which they're ramping up for older workers. John Lewis also has got a campaign to attract older workers to their driver roles, as well as to store roles. There's a whole kind of like selection, and a lot of the insurance firms, Phoenix Group, which is sponsoring our National Older Workers Week, Aviva, which has long been doing things like midlife MOTs, those do a lot of work. There's smaller organisations like Independent Living Fund Scotland, which is really, really good and has always been really good on just inclusive working policies generally and flexible working, and has been very proactive on the menopause type issues. Financial Services Compensation Scheme, they are like really out there on flexible first and age friendly. And the restaurant group, Corbin and King, they had somebody who was like, I think he was 78. They hired somebody who was 78 as one of their doormen, and it got a profile of him on the site. But they also do a lot of apprenticeships for older workers, and those apprenticeships are quite important for that whole kind of retraining issue or redeployment issue. If people want to change sector, similarly returner schemes. That we just held a kind of webinar with Morgan Sindall, the construction firm, and that was about career change. So that was trying to attract people from other sectors into the construction sector. So there is an awareness of that, you know, of the needs of older workers, and that they want to attract them. Yeah,
great. And Karen, I think, wants to come in on.
Of the ones that I've mentioned, I know a lot of them are things like McDonald's and customer services kind of type roles and sales roles, but there are also ones that are kind of you know, like the Assets is an accountancy, so it's an accountancy firm, so they're trying to get a good spread of, you know, people with accountancy skills, and they're offering flexible working, and some employers are definitely, so they see like the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency, they use a lot, so they do a lot of that kind of reverse mentoring type of stuff, where the older workers help with the younger workers, and the younger workers, you know, there's a where everybody's learning from each other, but they recognize, so and a lot of their older workers, they redeploy older workers into kind of more advisory roles and training roles, so training and managing, that kind of thing going on. So it's not just at the lower end of the scale, I don't think. I think it's trying to find, and the returner programs that we do, the Morgan Sindall one that I was talking to you about, is, you know, they have roles across the business, and what they're doing is to try and encourage people in. And sometimes people come in, maybe they just take a slight, if they're changing sector, spoken to a lot of returners who maybe take a one step down, you know, a few steps lower down the rung, but then they accelerate fairly quickly because the skills that they have, the general skills that they have and experience, you know, they can, you know, once they're back in and their confidence is back up again, they can sort of take off.
And I don't know about you, Mandy, but I'm seeing a lot more movement in this sector. I mean, you've just reeled off a list of some quite high profile sort of employers. Yeah. And, you know, when I started doing this sort of 2-3 years ago, people were like, nah, I'm not interested in older people, you know, forget it, Black Lives Matter, other things are more important. But I am seeing a lot more movement on this. What's your sense for how the market is moving? You know, is this a trend, or is it like a little short-term blip, or do you think that this is, you know, what's the horizon looking like, and should we be more optimistic?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that it is moving, and I think there are more employers coming on board. It does feel that it's quite gradual. It needs to accelerate a lot. But I think COVID in a way has been a kind of has helped in some senses, although there's been there's a lot of focus on the people who are economically inactive, people who've dropped out of the workforce, often for health reasons, and that has focused, I mean, that has got news headlines and things, so hopefully that will sort of encourage government and others to kind of focus more on how to get those people in and keep those people in the workforce. So in a way that's a good thing, but COVID has also brought obviously the changes with flexible working. People realize that it can be done, that it doesn't necessarily affect productivity, it might boost productivity in fact, and I think labour shortages have concentrated the minds of employers as well. They just have to, you know, that we're in a, you know, the demographics are changing. We are going to have to work later. You know, a lot of people who retired early during COVID, there was a big retirement thing. A lot of, quite a lot of those are now looking at having to unretire, unretirement thing, because of the cost of living rising and everything like that. So there needs to be, more of an effort. And I think there's a realization that there needs to be more of an effort and more targeted support for helping people to get back in, and keeping people in for longer.
Which is encouraging. I think that is really encouraging. There were quite a few comments of people who've sort of taken things like career breaks, and now when they're kind of applying, finding this wall, if you like, of sort of overqualified, or you're not. What advice would you give people who might have taken a career break, who are struggling to get their CV kind of past that first initial hurdle?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge issue, and it's one that we've seen on Working Mums for a long time. And there are more. I mean, I was just writing something on women returners. It's a big organisation that helps with women back into the workplace. They had their annual conference this week, and they had a lot of employers on board with they've done amazing work over the years, and just sort of promoting the skills, not just the skills that those people have from before they had their career break, but the skills that they may have developed during their career break. Some of them that were on that conference had like 30-year career breaks. So they've done a lot on that, and the returner programs have grown from initially they were, when I started writing about them, they were all in the financial services sector, and they've definitely broadened out to other sectors. There's still not nearly enough of them, but the idea is that the programs themselves, even if you have a small program, it shows the rest of the company in some way or shape or form the value of attracting people who've had career breaks, and what they can bring, not just in terms of their skills and experience, but also different perspective from having had that career break. So I do think that there is, there's more awareness of that. We just need to keep pushing and, telling people stories. And, one of the things we do on Working Wise, because one of the things that came up with what people were saying about ageism and, attitudes about being overqualified, or, you're going to be too expensive, or you don't have the qualification, that comes up a lot as well, because often jobs ask people to have specific qualifications, which people might not have a university degree, for example. It wasn't as common as it is now to go to university several decades ago, but they have, I've spoken to people and said, I've got 30-40 years experience in this job, and I can't get past the ATS. Is trying to highlight all of that. But also we have a kind of section that's called Working Life Stories, where we interview people about their careers and their career paths, and just to show what these people, what the experience that people have, and to counter some of the kind of myths that often people have, like, older people, they can't learn new things and stuff like that. I mean, that comes up again and again, and you're just like, how much change has everybody been through in the last decades? People have gone through all sorts of things, all the technology changes, the recession, all of that, and everybody's adapted and been made redundant multiple times and come back. Though people need to see that. And sometimes when I've interviewed people, they're like, my colleagues don't know anything of this. They don't know that I ran this European-wide business network or whatever. They don't know all the things that I can do, which seems so sad that they don't. And I interviewed one woman, and she just said, thank you for listening to me. Nobody has ever asked me about my career ever before. I have felt completely invisible, and that's just awful. And the more that we can do to sort of just push that out to employers and just show that a lot of the ideas that they might have about older workers are just based on bias and not on reality. Yeah, and that's, again, our survey last year showed a lot of people do disguise their age, or they even change things like, if they did O levels, because that gives your age away, if you did O levels and not GCSEs. I know that recruitment agencies I know that they tell people to take, you know, their you know, do that, disguise their age somehow or another, which seems awful. So what we try to do is highlight to employers that the you know, the degree to which people perceive them to be ageist, that they feel that they have to do this to disguise you know, all the experience that they have. I guess I think the sort of advice, certainly talking to CV experts and stuff, is to not necessarily disguise your age, but to make sure that what you have on your CV is as relevant as possible to the role, to tailor your CV to the role that you're applying for. So, and then if you've had a career break, you know, to have that paragraph at the top that sums up, you know, what you can offer, what you can bring. I mean, the ATS systems are a very difficult thing to get around, because you have to put in those keywords that, you know, you have to just make sure that the words that are in the advert, the job advert, you're kind of mirroring the language that's in the job advert to some degree. So you just have to tailor your CV to be in line with whatever you're applying for.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to come in and say something on that one as well, because that is one of my biggest bugbears. And I very much, I would certainly say only do the last 15 years, because I think anything that you've done 30 years ago, you're really going to struggle to say that that's completely right with that. I have some real sympathy with making a CV 1 page, 2 pages maximum, if it has to be 2 pages. But I absolutely take the view that your age is an asset, but people are lazy, right? So they're all ageist, or a lot of people are, and that is the evidence. It has been shown time and time again. Most people looking at CVs are in their 20s, and they will discriminate on the basis of age, right? We know that happens. It does. And it's probably a vast underestimation. So, you know, when we're hearing figures like 47%, 50, I would say that's an underestimation. So you are not going to get around it, right? People are ageist. So I think if you acknowledge that, then I would suggest that the first thing that you do is, how is it that you can think about marketing your age in a way that is an asset, right? So maybe in your 20s, you valued and you thought about different things, but in your 50s, you know, what have you learned? What's great about you now in your 50s, and how can you position that and bring it forward in a way that makes it clear, oh, this is brilliant. I never even thought about someone being in their 50s before. So, you know, we've had people get jobs because they'll say things like, the reason I really want this job, and the reason I think I'm going to be brilliant at it, is because my kids are grown up now. You know, I've got all the time in the world. I gave up my career all these times. I'm so bored of not working. I'm desperate to do some work. You know, and actually talking about age in those sorts of languages. You know, in my 20s, I really cared what people thought about me, but now I'm in my 50s. I know what I'm really good at, and I know that I can give amazing support to people who are younger than me. So actually, you know, helping, and when people are sitting there kind of going, oh God, this woman looks a bit older than I thought, you know, even actually calling it out and saying, I know you're probably thinking I'm older, and you know, you probably think I'm not going to have an awful lot of fun. Actually, I don't want to come out with you on a Friday night, but I'll be the person asking you in the office if you need any more help. And I'm not too proud to make a cup of tea, because actually I know the value of teamwork. And actually being able to kind of just acknowledge the elephant in the room, but talk about it in a way that you have to do the legwork around what's brilliant about your age, because you know that they're not seeing it. So you have to paint the picture, because people are just lazy, right? They're just lazy. And yeah, I mean, you can't hide it anyway. You can hide it off your CV, but then you can turn up in an interview. So you're on a hiding to nothing. That's my little rant over and done with. The last thing I'd say is the vast majority of companies will always advertise on their own company website. They won't always advertise on jobs boards. So it has to be in this location. Actually, who are the companies that do that? And almost forget the job, because whatever job you do, it's going to be different anyway. I mean, I've never done a job where you start off with your job description, it's exactly the same 6 months later. You know, so it's going to morph whatever you bring to it. We've had so many people go through programs, and at the end of it, they go, I applied for this job. It's not the job I'm doing. I mean, I'm doing something completely different. Because most people, when they write a job description, they haven't got a Scooby. They just plop out whatever they did 2 years ago. You know, so they don't even think about it.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry. Right. Let's come back to some of the questions. So with regards to things like flexible and part-time working, COVID has really driven a massive shift in that. You know, is there anything, what would you predict are the things that are kind of going to happen going forward in this sort of space?
Yeah, I mean, there's an almighty battle. I spent my life responding, like getting angry about newspaper headlines. So COVID has shown clearly that remote working works and that people can, get on, and those companies that were prepared, that already offered it and already were kind of more flexible kind of first companies had when I speak to them, they had a fairly smooth transition often during COVID. They did, because they were ready, and there's a huge demand for flexible working. Flexible working isn't just remote working. I think that sometimes over COVID, it became almost synonymous with flexible working, but there's so many other forms of flexible working that people are interested in doing. But every bit of research shows that that's what people want. And our research for older workers shows it's massive, like work-life balance is huge, and that, people's priorities change as they get older, and that work-life balance goes much further up the agenda. So yes, I think I can't remember, I've lost my train of thought now.
Well, just sort of part-time, where things are moving. So it feels like,
yeah. So definitely, the employers that we work with have been trialing different types of flexible working. They've done, hybrid has a lot of complications. There's, just to make it work, to make sure that those people who are working more remotely are not passed over, don't become invisible, that it's natural that the proximity bias, if somebody's in the office with you, that they might get some of the, the better work or the promotion opportunities, all that kind of stuff. And I think a lot of them are aware of that and are trying to monitor that kind of thing. I think that COVID has definitely driven forward flexible working, and I don't think there's really, despite sort of different members of the government sort of trying to being totally against working from home and having these kind of very old school ideas about what people do when they're working from home, eating cheese.
We are talking about you,
and all that kind of stuff. I think employers know, what the reality is. There are pockets of, there are employers, leaders and managers, senior managers that still are kind of resistant. But the evidence is in, the evidence is there.
And
when there's labour shortages and stuff, people are leaving. People are definitely looking. Candidates are definitely, we know, are asking those questions. They're researching flexible working policies. They're asking the questions at interview. They are not taking up jobs if they're not flexible. So it makes business sense to offer it. There's no reasons not to. It's and everything that's happening, all the disruption that we're seeing in business constantly, and climate change and all the things that are happening at the moment, and the fact that the workforce is aging, we're going to be working for longer. They just have to do it. They have to make it work.
We will make them.
Yeah, exactly. They have to. So yeah.
All right. Thank you for that, Mandy. I'm going to stop the recording there. So